as we get ready to start our project, this is our Father's Day card box. It is originally painted in Delta colors, but they've discontinued so many of my paints that I am converting everything into deco art. But I think it's an interesting lesson for us to learn how to deal with it, because it's something that is, I think it's a permanent change in our industry. To always be in flux is kind of what I mean. Anyway, so what I've done is I printed out on DecoArt. They have an awesome chart for color conversion from Delta into DecoArt, and I'm pretty sure they have it for the others. I haven't looked. Look on the website under links, and that will be there to print that out. It'll be converted on your packet, but if you want your own conversion chart for all the paints, then that's there. This box comes with a fantastic little insert for your cards and things, and your chips. And so what we're going to want to do is we're going to seal the whole thing. Like, you got to seal everything. And I've done the top already. I've used multi-purpose sealer, and you can hear that the grain has raised. So I'm going to use an 80 grit sanding disc, and we're just going to lightly sand it down. Okay, and you can already listen to the difference. Okay, and then I'll go into a little bit lighter sanding with a finer sandpaper. Okay, and that's there, and that's now. We'll go one more side. Doesn't take a lot to be able to get it sanded nice and smoothly. Okay, we're going to do that to the whole box. You have two choices with your hinges. You can go ahead and take them out, or you can leave them in. And so I'm going to leave mine on, but I'm probably going to go ahead and tape around them so that that I don't make them too goofy messy. I like the hinges that they put on these for us. Okay, that's where we're at. Alright, so I have all my mixing stuff everywhere. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to use my airtight palette. This is an airtight. This blue thing right here has got a gasket in it. It has 4 locking things on it. It locks right on the top of that. It seals on all 4 sides so that you don't get the warping and you don't get all that kind of problem. You can use it. The paint peels off. This is actually scratched on here. I got it rubbed against some concrete. But the paint peels off. You can use it for blending on the lid. You can use it blending in here. This is the last paint that I did, and just a little scratch there. If it's really fine, just so that you know, if your paint is really sheer, obviously there's nothing to peel. So you'll have to just wipe that off with a damp cloth. It does not peel if there's nothing there to peel. So that's a confusion that we've had with this. But if it dries and it's got a big clump, you almost can't keep the paint on there, as far as like it just releases itself. You do want it blends the same as using a waxy palette or something like that, so it doesn't have any effect on your blending. It's got big sides and it's got the little ones. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-mix, because mixing colors as you're going through a project just really moves you in and out of both sides of your brain. I'm going to mix my paints, store them all in here, so I'm all ready to go. And I thought maybe we'd kind of walk through the mixing. Our darkest green, I'm going to do this in color families. Our darkest green is going to be black. I know that doesn't sound like a true statement, but I'm just going to go ahead and do a straight conversion of black straight on over there onto my palette. Our next one is going to be black green, and that converts straight over. Black green is black green, so we're good with that. So make sure we're all shook up. Okay, this is where you're going to want to take out your bottle opener, because when you open bottle after bottle after bottle of paints, and this just clips on there. That's called a pop top. So we'll squirt that out. So I'm going to mix on, let me get this out of the way so you can see what's going on. My table is a disaster. I'm going to mix on my gray palette, just so that I can see. We've got Kelly green. Well, no, we're mixing Christmas green right now. And so what I want to do is kind of have a cascading color family going this way. So I just want my greens with my greens. Make sure that I'm going to check this, because I think the Hunter green is going to be darker, so I won't put this in my palette until I'm sure that that's going to be a darker green. So we have 3 Black Forest greens. Listen to me, I'm talking out of turn. Okay, there I am, Christmas green. We got 2 hollies to 1 Kelly. So we'll spit out 2 hollies, and we'll spit out 1 Kelly. Okay, so we measure them like chocolate chips. Okay, that's how you give yourself some kind of measuring device. Now I happen to have made myself a book of Delta colors, and when I've taken out Christmas green, this is one of the things that I think is frustrating about, okay, now this is, I think, very obviously darker. This is what's frustrating about conversion charts. They're never completely right. Now that's going to dry 20% darker, but I still think, this is like a Delta chip of paint, I still think that's maybe just a little bit light. Once you get your colors mixed, and I'm going to go ahead and do my greens and I'll show you a little trick that I do. Once you get the colors mixed, then you can assess them and see if they belong to the same families. Because, you know, it's just different when you're picking paints to paint with. You choose them because they go, versus when you're creating new colors out of the colors, then they may not quite go because you're mixing from all separate things. Anyway, I think you get the point. So now we'll mix our hunter green, which is going to be black forest green and dark pine. Yeah, this is going to be much darker. And that is 3 of these. 1, 2, I'm going to do a little bit smaller amount of this. 2, 1 dark pine. Okay, we'll get the opening. Some of these colors don't get used very often, and they'll get a little separated at the top. One of the things that you can do is you can make sure, put them in upside down, like sometimes store them this way, and then other times put them in this way, and then the paint will go down and the separated stuff will not be as bad. Okay, so there we go. One of those. Let's mix that up. This is, I think this is a good lesson to have. Like, I think this project rocks as far as Father's Day, or, you know, for your husband, or, you know, a son, or anything like that. It would make a great Christmas gift. And so I think the lesson, though, in mixing the paints is very valuable. So we had black forest green was all by itself. I'm going to put this out here on the palette for visual sake. Now here's what I know about paint. And I don't know everything, but I do know enough to get maybe to be dangerous. All right, this color was part of the mix for this color. So this color and this color are going to automatically go together. Okay. Now this one does look like it would go with that okay. It's a little bit vivid. And so what I'm going to do, just to make sure that it goes, I'm going to take just a little bit, just a touch, and I'm going to put that into this paint. And now they're like blood cousins, you know, blood of my blood kind of thing. And now that just brings it a little bit closer. I still have my contrast, but now that's going to go with that, is going to go with that. And now they're all family. So if you just taint each one of them with the same family blood, you could do it with a color that's not even related. You could say, I'm going to take honey brown and I'm going to mix honey brown into every single color on my palette, and it would unify the palette. Okay, so it's a common color. So now what I'll do is I'll take this off my palette and I will put it into the pocket where it goes. Okay, and we'll take some of this. And now our greens are all mixed. With the Airtight palette, I taught class in Long Island. Hello, ladies. I'm sure some of you are watching. And we were so funny because we were so intent on painting. And we had our palettes out, and we had our, you know, the lids closed and everything like that. Well, we had our lids opened. If you don't cover this, the paints are going to dry. So it's an airtight palette, but it only works if you cover it. And we just got too much in our artist's brain. So you take your little misting tool and you give it, make sure your holes are pointing, you just give everybody a drink. Okay, and you just mist the palette, and that way everything gets, like the shell, the scummy stuff won't get on there. What did I do with my lid? There it is. And if I was closing up for the night or discontinuing my painting or whatever, I would just put my lid on. Okay, and somewhere it lines up on here. Okay, lock it in place, and we're good to go. And now my palette's going to be fresh for me in the morning. Okay, but if you don't shut the lid, you're going to have the peel off part of this working just fine. But now what's nice about this is, I think, one of the keys to mixing your colors. What's nice about this is you do not need to remember, if you're shading with a color, you're going to use a darker color. If you're highlighting with a color, you're going to use a lighter color. So this way, we know what we're doing. We don't need to remember the name of it. We know that that's the lightest, that's the middle, that's darker, that's the darkest. We know that those are our green families. So we no longer, you could label this or whatever. Don't use a Sharpie to label this, because if you do, you will Sharpies actually change the molecular structure of the plastic and it'll bond with it. But you could feasibly take a piece of tape and tape it right there and then write the names on it on the piece of tape if you wanted to. But then, you know, you're going to have other issues. Anyway, so by doing them in color families, I think that you're good. And I so totally lied. We did not mix our Kelly Green. And hopefully this is going to be a lighter color because I've got this like perfect little system going here, right? All right, Kelly Green is 1 mistletoe with 1 primary yellow. Okay. I think I'm going to move this over because I think my mistletoe looks like it needs a little more shaking up. If the paint pile is perky on top, then it's nice and mixed. If it's real flat like that one is, it's not real flat, but that means it needs a little bit more shaking. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, 1 to 1. Now, remember our green story that we had. We need to take just a little bit of our mother color. Okay, and we need to bring that into this color. Just to muddy it, marry it down. Okay, and now we're going to go put this in our palette. Okay, we need to make a yellow color, so we're going to do that next. We're going to add just a touch of cadmium orange into our cadmium yellow. And that is Delta's yellow. That's just a touch. That just means you're going to kiss it with just a little bit of that. Maybe another little kiss. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and mix these and leave them on my palette for a minute so that I can see which order that I want them to go in to. And I can't do that without them mixed. Okay, and we'll go and mix our straw, which is going to be 2 golden straws. Which is in my bucket of doom somewhere here. 2 golden straws to 1 primary yellow. So 1 and 2 and 1 primary yellow. And you want these dots to be about equal sized for the measurement to work anyway. Stay ahead of my green. I can totally screw that over to the green side if I want to here. Okay, now Spice Tan is going to be 2 honey brown and 1 dove gray. I use so much honey brown, I've noticed. So 2 honey brown and 1 dove gray. Dove gray is kind of almost like a mother toner in these conversions. It's been interesting. It's in a number of these mixes. 1 dove gray. It's going to lighten it and it's also going to neutralize it. Okay, get that all mixed up. Okay, then we're going to go into Spice Brown, which is going to be 2 milk chocolates and 1 asphaltum. Okay, now this is going to be obviously our, 2 milk chocolates. And 1 asphaltum. You know, my thumb is so much more convenient than a pop top, but my thumb starts hurting and I don't like that feeling. Okay, 1 asphaltum. Okay. Now I bet you can guess what we're going to do with these browns when we get them done. Just for a little unity. And just wipe off your palette knife as you go. If a little bit touches inside of those colors, you won't care. Okay, we've got our Kelly. Now we need Flush Tan, which is going to be, phew, this one's like complicated. Okay, so 3 dove grays, 2 yellow ochres, and a partridge in a pear tree. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Okay. Okay, 2 yellow ochres and a warm white. Okay, you can see why I didn't mix this on the Stay Wet palette or on the this palette. Oh, and by the way, you can make this into a Stay Wet palette. Just use your paper towel and a piece of deli wrap, and you can totally convert it into a palette that will stay wet, and then you can peel this off. I mean, just throw that part away and it'll be like Stay Wet that way. So you just make your own insert. Most of you do that anyway. This is just nice because it's airtight. Okay, and then we had our dark chocolate, which is our dark chocolate is bittersweet. Alright, so now I'm going to start laying out my other colors. So I've got, I think we're going to make Barn Red one of our browns here, although it's going to be a red. It's deep red, deep burgundy and Napa. 2 deep burgundies to 1 Napa. 1, 2, I'm running out of room. And 1 Napa. Now the key is going to be to keep myself clean on the edge of my palette here. Okay. Thankfully those 2 colors are kind of close. Okay, so to do our, let's talk about this for a second. We've got our bittersweet chocolate. I don't think I've used this color for a while, so I'm going to spit a little bit out here. Okay, that's going to be our darkest brown, and then this is our middle brown. So what I think I want to do is I'm going to put just a hair, oops, and I had red on my palette knife. Oh well, a little bit of that in that color, and a little bit in this color. Just to get everybody nice and happy together, all of our browns going together. So now we have a better family, and we're not going to have to worry about things matching. So even if these colors didn't match the Delta colors exactly, they're going to go together on our palette. They're going to be really close, and we're going to be okay with that. Okay, so we're going to make our yellows be our light greens. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make this the next color. And then the lighter yellow. It could also be a light brown, but in this case, this is the way I'm doing it. You can do it any way that you want, obviously. Okay. Then we'll go into our browns, and we'll do our darkest brown, which is going to be our bittersweet. Okay, you can spit that one out again. Make enough so that you won't have to change them again. And I've got to show you a little bit of a secret that I have discovered. In just a minute I will. There we go. Now we'll go into, whoops, I got one more, don't I? This is almost a yellow color. I could use a fatter palette knife to put these into my palette. Here. Okay, then I've spilled into this little guy right here, so I'll wipe that out so I don't make a mess and blend everything together. Phew. Okay, and we need our red. Dum, dum, dum. Get that on there, and I think that we can call that good right now. One of these greens is going to be a base color. I haven't gotten that far, but this will be what I start with, and I'll mix my base color. Either I'll keep it on my palette so that I can just base and be done with it and mix a big pile and go, But after I get done with that, I'll probably put that in my larger sizes over here. Okay, my new super secret, ta-da! These are fantastic little, we all know about paint cubbies, right? Let me get you in a little bit closer for this part. We all know about paint cubbies. We all want them, use them, love them because we have to use them. What I hate about a paint cubby, what I hate about the plastic containers I can get currently at the craft store is that the lid pops off instead of screwing on. And I hate that. I don't know that they're always going to be leak resistant. So these are a twist on. They've got a, what do you call it, gaskety doohickey in there that prevents them from leaking. They are food safe. They are the kind of plastic that you can put anything in, including, ta-da, the brush cleaner. So if you want to put a little bit of brush cleaner in here and take that to class, then you can. Also, if you're not into this kind of palette situation, then you can put them in these little cubbies. They come in various sizes. They'll be on the website. And they are, I mean, just, you can wash them out and everything. And they come with one more surprise. Should I have this ready? Sorry. They come with a thing called a taggle that you can just pop right on the top there. Okay, it has a little hanging strip, so you can even, you can even hang these puppies. Put a little label right on there, and you can write the color name and everything right on there. They twist off, and so they're optional. You can buy them separately. You can buy replacements. You can hang them. I'm just like in love with this idea. So this is my new super secret weapon for when we need to have our paints mixed, and they're affordable, so you can definitely have sets and sets of them. We're going to base the top of our box, and we have two methods that we can use with this. Let's go out a little wider. I can use a Filbert glaze brush, which is fantastic. I highly recommend this brush. It takes a little bit longer. Or I can use a roller. Now, because this is a smaller size box, if I use a big giant roller, it's going to be awkward and stuff. These awesome rollers come with a dense sponge head that you can replace. This one is flocked, making it nice for varnishing and things like that. This one is, you know, just a black dense, which is nice because it doesn't stain, and then people don't worry about it being cleaned off and everything like that. You just pop that head on there. I'm going to use this because it's quicker, and I can kind of maybe show you a little bit why that would be quicker. Be careful when you are using a roller because they tend to spit in my clothes while they're green. I don't necessarily want this color green on my shirt. So what we're going to do, I'm going to do this side with my roller, okay? Oops, and roll right over the edge. Okay, I don't think I'm trying to hurry. Oops, I'm trying to trash my box though. Okay, so I got that side with the roller, and now I'm going to do this side with my brush. I'm not timing myself, but nice long strokes when you're going to be base coating. You really do want to go in the grain with the grain of the wood. It usually works better. Okay, so I think you get the idea that the roller is going to make that just so much nicer. When we get into the slip slapping, it's going to really, really go faster and smoother. Okay, now I'm going to hold this down with my finger. I mixed almost exactly the right exact amount of paint. The nice thing about rollers is I can just roll. There's lots in my brush. Okay, in my brush. This is not a brush. So what we're going to do to keep this fresh, though, is we're going to take a plastic bag. Take a piece of plastic if you want to. I don't want to rinse this out because I'm going to have to make this green again. So I'm going to put this into the plastic bag and roll the bag down on the head. And that will keep my roller fresh, and I can just take it out and use it again until I want to wash it. Okay, I would even suggest that the roller did a smoother job of coverage than this. You can see a lot of brush streaks here. I always work in thin coats. I'm going to use my sanding disc in between my coats, and it will give me a nicer finish. There's one thing that if you're a beginner painter and you don't know what you're doing and maybe you feel insecure about your painting, the one thing that you can always do best everybody can do equally well, I should say. Skill level doesn't apply, is in your finish. So make sure that you begin well and that you end well, and then it will elevate your painting. A really cruddy finish will bring down even the best painter's finish. So I'm going to sand, smooth me out, go to my finer sanding disc. Okay. Now why? And now my finest. I don't want this glassy, so don't get too carried away with your sanding. If it's glassy, your paint won't stick. Why did I do a coat of this and then I'm going to do another coat? When you slip slap on a piece, like I have to make this shadowy area around here, and I have to highlight my center. When you're going to slip slap, if I were to use 2 or 3 colors on this right now, and it was the light color, then this would lift off the color and it would show the base. So by having the base color on, when we slip slap, it will not lift off on this, and it'll be nice and safe. Alright, this is where we're going to go. We're going to take our roller out of our bag. I've got my colors mixed. I'm going to take my palette off of here so I have a little bit of blending down. This size roller is going to be fantastic for this. When I did the original piece, I used a, let's get you so you can see everything going on here. I used oval glaze, one of these big brushes, but if I'd have had a little guy like this, I'd have been all over that. Okay. So we're going to re-wet, and what we want to do is make this blend, this fadey blend that goes. You're going to learn some really great techniques with this project. It's really, really a nice learning piece. I think there's some quality elements to it. Okay, so there, I mean, look how fast that just rebased the whole entire box. Okay, now we want to do that to keep it wet. If you live in a dry climate, you might have to mist this just a little, or you might have to work like in a dry brush. So we are going to load our brush. This is our brush in this case, with Christmas green, which is going to be this. I'm going to load the toe of the brush, and I'm going to blend on my palette, getting just like a mix. This side has the light, this side has the dark. I'm going to keep this to the inside at all times. Okay, so I'm going to start at my corner. I'm going to tip it if I need to leave the paint there. And I'm going to just start blending this just like I was floating, reloading as I need to, keeping it on the tip. This is a wet in wet effect. Okay, blend around. You're going to work kind of quickly, but hey, if it screws up, just put another coat on it and start over, right? Okay, I'm going to turn my brush around. I love how everything becomes a brush. Sponges, rollers. I'm going to leave that highlighted in the middle. Okay, and if I need to, I'm going to put my finger down there where I know I can blend it back out. Okay, get it nice and rounded. And then I lean my brush up, like when I'm trying to like just leave the color there. And if I want to go real soft and walk it out, I just don't use any pressure at all. So, okay, now I'm going to do, let's see, do I need more? I think I'll need a little bit more over here, where I'm just going to, this isn't touching right here, so I'm leaning it over there because I want to leave that color on there. Okay. Yeah, liking it. Okay, now I'm going to go into this darker green, dirty brush. I'll blend right in that same spot. Get my graduation. And now I'm going to go over here into my darks, my darker edge. Not dark enough for me. The problem with wet and wet is it can be sometimes difficult to keep a good color. And sometimes you can overblend. Okay, liking how that's looking though. Get over there in the corner, turn my brush around, lock that out. Okay. Just work right there. Tap it on the edge. Okay, now I've got a couple of smudgies over here. I'm going to show you how to get rid of a smudgy. This is just such a fun, easy way to blend a box. Now this is going to need a little sanding when it dries. It's going to take some time to dry. Okay, so I just smoothed them out. Gentle pressure when you're smoothing. Got a smoothie? Just smooth it gently. Okay, if we have any blemishes and things like that, we can totally take them out later. I can show you how to fix that too. Okay, and I'm thinking I'm liking it. Do I need to keep going? Oh, and our outer edge is black green. And I want to say black green was the same. Do we have black green in this palette? Yes, we do. Okay, so I'm going to put this on this since I ran out. That's a very strong color, so that's really a good candidate for wet and wet blending. So get it nice and evenly mixed. Sometimes you can get wheel turns when you do this. So you can get like little splotches where the color isn't all the way around the palette. So this is just the edge color. So just ever so gently. I don't want to take away everything that I've done. I want to shade it and deepen it. Now I'm standing up. You could not do this sitting down. Now just then I inched in just a little too much here, so I moved my roller over and blended with this middle area. I'm leaning over the project, getting into it. And now I backed it too much into there, so I backed it off with the muted side of my brush there. Okay, gotta get that corner down. If we dried and I couldn't do this wet and wet, it would be fine. We can use, oops, I got a little splodge there. No splodging. Okay, then if it dried, we could dry rub and do some things with that. I'll show you how to dry rub just to even things out, but if you live in one of those yucky, horrible, dry climates where you can't keep your paint fresh, then I'll show you how to do that. And maybe we need a little bit more middle area here, like it's not exactly smooth. I think I'm real happy with that for the very first shot out. That was very fast. I'm going to blot all this off with a paper towel. I'm going to neutralize it in my green. So I'm just picked up some green, I'm going to work it on my palette. That just neutralizes all the colors back down to a medium kind of tone. And then I'm going to take this and just roll over just a little bit here and there. Okay, yeah, I got rid of that one. And my fingerprint. Okay, I'm liking that. Okay, let's leave this. We'll let it dry. Put your pattern on. No, maybe not pattern on yet. Let's get it dry and we'll do the next step and then pattern. Okay, so I want to sand gently because I don't want to sand through my layers. Just want to take that nubbiness down that you get. Before you freak out and you see any scratches, as long as you're not removing the paint, this part, those scratches are showing the wood, and with water, that comes off. So once you varnish it and stuff like that, it'll be fine. So we'll dry that off. What I want to do is I want to even out a couple things. Okay, so we are going to move into a big, giant dome stencil brush. This is domed this way, it's domed this way. You're going to want sets of these because you can't use them when they're wet. Okay, so you got to use them dry. They're cheap, 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 and they rock on. Okay, I love them. Can you tell? All right, so we're going to get out our black green. Okay, because I see just a little bit of unevenness. I'm going to put my glasses on. A little bit of unevenness over here. And actually, you know what? Before I do that, let's go into our background green. We're going to just dip it straight into our paint, and then we're going to take a paper towel and we're going to wipe it all off. Now, because it's going over the same color, I don't need to be too careful with that. I want to get rid of these little freckles of paints. Okay, that's just going to mask that down just a little bit. Okay, and get rid of these. I'm going to round out my corner. Brushing gently. You don't want to leave a whole bunch. You don't want to get into this dark area at all. Okay, just gently, 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 gently. Sometimes I stipple when I can't get the color to do what I want it to. And dip a little bit more. Okay, go up here. See a little freckle up here. Go away, little freckle. Paint grabs to wet paint, so you want to make sure that you're dry. Okay, put it right there. And then we're going to have stuff, art, and things on top of this, so it doesn't have to be totally smooth. Now the reason I went ahead and started in this color was because it's lighter. What I can do is I can go now into my dark color, neutralize the paint in my brush by just wiping it off right there. Okay, that's going to make it kind of an in-between dark color. Now I'll load my dark and wipe that off, and that should be a little bit more like the color I need it to be. Wipe it off nice and strong. And then I'm going to come over here into my edges, and I'm just going to brush dusty to deepen those edges. I don't want to eat this other color up. Okay, so can you see the difference that that's made? That color in the dark corner, and then like say we have up here, you can tell the difference in those colors. So we'll go around in circles here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Reload. Come over here, corner. And I can do, what are you doing there? I can do just a little bit skimming on my edge, just to bring that up just a little bit. Okay, same thing over here. Bring that out. Now that's looking a little lonely to me, so I'm going to back that down a little bit with the color right under it, with that medium dark green. Neutralize it, load the paint. Okay, then we'll come over here, I'm leaning over so I can kind of see. Either I'll bring that darker out or I'll tone that black down. Okay, like that. Maybe I'll do a little bit the same here. Okay. Okay, I brought that in a little bit. I might have to back that one down. I got a little bit liney right there. Okay, now I can't go backwards into my light color because you just can't. So now I have to get another one of these brushes out. And where are you? There they are. Okay, so I got a little bit smaller one. And this time I'm going to go and I want just a little, I'm looking for my color picture. Somebody was using some of her tools. Okay, color picture. We have these fantastic things called red flexi tools. So you can use your red flexi tool and you can put it onto the edge of, say, your water bin or something like that to keep your picture upright. And they flex and they bend and you can see what you're doing. I think I want just a little bit more yellow in the top. So the color mix that I used for Kelly Green was Plus Primary Yellow. So I'm going to take a little bit of my Kelly Green and I'm going to add a wad of Plus Yellow. Okay, and mix that together. That's going to be a lighter mix, and that will give me a little bit of a highlight in the middle. So that's where I'm going. I want to pick that up just a bit, so I'm going to go into this yellowy green. This is not written in the instructions because this is what's happened to my box in my project. So I'm going to go right here into the middle, this outer middle, because we do have a black hole here with a bunch of cards. And I'm going to just pick that up with just a little bit of the brighter green because I want it that way. So you don't have to do this, but I want mine done. Painting is so personal and it's so nice to be able to say, hey, you know what, I like that. I'm going to make mine dark. I like it bold. When I taught last weekend, I had one lady who was like, I'm a soft painter, and golly bum did she paint some gorgeous flowers. You know, and we had somebody else that was a strong painter, and equally gorgeous and totally different effect. So, you know, there is no wrong or right. Okay. Merely suggestions, right? Okay, so this got just a little bit of yellowy green to it. I'm thinking I'm liking it. Okay, and I know I'm going to have my cards and things like that here, so I think I'm good with that. I think we'll stay with that. You let it completely dry, please, and then you can go ahead and put your pattern on it, and we'll get to that part next week. Alright, so when I do these, I try to make sure that I'm giving you all the information I can give. I've got my yellow tracing paper on a roll here. And you know, you could just tear off a piece and you could, you know, trace your paper and that'd be all fine and dandy. However, I've got a really good tip for you. This is how you can save yourself some thinking and a step. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to lay my box down here. I'm going to trace off the exact edge that it is. Okay, I've got that on there, and then when I trace, I'll go ahead and rip. The nice thing about this is this paper has grain. It has grain that runs this way and grain that runs this way, so it always tears nice and straight. I don't know if you've ever tried to tear a page out of a magazine that didn't have a grain and it jaggedy teared. That was why, because the grain of the magazine didn't run both ways. So now what I've got is I have got the outline of the piece so that I can do my layout on here and get it exactly where I want. And then when I put my tracing on my piece, I'm going to have it pre-laid out. I'll just mark my lines, tape it on there, trace my piece. Alright, so we're getting ready to trace our pattern. I have two new products that I've been using myself for 3 or 4 years. They're the same pens I've been using for 3 or 4 years. The problem we have when we use a pencil is the point will dull, and when the point is dulling, it makes for a very inaccurate line, okay? And it also will smudge and transfer, get on your fingers and things like that. You can use a regular Sharpie, which I don't even have. You can use an expensive radiograph pen or something like that, but I found that these are just a couple of dollars. They're in sizes, which is what I really like. And so you have the 2 sizes, and you can get them finer and make, you know, depending on your preference, you can use them for fine detail work, that kind of stuff. So this is a much nicer way of making your tracing. It also doesn't bleed as some markers do. One of the other fine nuances of tracing is when you get a long line like this, I actually can do a better job of lining with my brush than I can with my hand, free-flowing. Use a liner, use a ruler. Let's not be heroic about all this stuff, right? Let's use the tools that we have. Get the hard stuff done. You know, the straighter it is, the less it's going to mess with your mind later. You know, and it just goes nice and quick, and you're real sure of yourself. So use those tools. As I'm getting into, I don't know if you've ever had this happen. As I'm getting into these little points here, this is a little heart, and it's got its little point. All right, but making these little V's right here, if I had anything thicker than the pen point that I have, then that would make that a mess. I'd have to sharpen a pencil or something like that. So make sure, once again, those tools that you're using are helping you and not hurting you. The other thing that I wanted to let you know, yes, this is kind of infomercial-ish about this. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to tell you all the benefits of it. But the other thing that this won't do is it won't crease your paper, so that when you're tracing a line, you know how when you sometimes make a bad line, if you've creased your paper when you're going to trace it on, you're almost more than likely going to trace on the bad line instead of being able to correct it. These don't crease. It doesn't leave a little indent in it. So when you do your tracing, you're going to have a pure surface and not a bunch of dented in stuff. Alright, now I've got my pattern laying on here, and we want to talk about how to keep it in place so that that we don't have, you know, problems with it shifting while we're tracing, because there's a lot of lines here. The lettering needs to be pretty precise or it's going to look kind of junky, and we don't do junky art around here anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to tear a hole into the middle of our pattern in a couple of places. get it lined on there so that we exactly like it. Now you've seen the old trick where you tape it over the edge, right? And I bet you've also seen where when you tape it over the edge, everything shifts. So we get it on there, we take our tape, and we tape through the middle of the piece. And when you do this, there's a couple of things that happen. One, when you're using your transfer paper, also cut your transfer paper down just a little bit if you want to prevent heel marks in your piece. So cut your transfer paper. Always use old transfer paper if you've got it. When you do this, you can lift up the edges to peek and see, and then you can put your transfer paper under either side and move it around as you need to. So by taping in the middles, then you also don't get shift. Okay, it's nice and anchored. And then anyway, you get the point. Once again, on the giving the tips kind of thing, here's one of my favorite tips. Use a fine tipped stylus for your finer areas. The same reason we use a fine tip liner is so that when we trace those details on, we get the precision. Every time you trace, so I transfer my pattern, I trace my pattern, I use my stylus, use my brush to fill in. Every one of those takes us further and further and further and further away from the integrity of the line. So we want to make sure that in every way that we can, we preserve the integrity of the line. And that's one of the reasons why we use worn out graphite paper, is because when it's new, your lines will be very thick and fluffy because that's so much stuff, the stuff that transfers is so thick. So what we want is the worn out transfer paper, which can make a line that you can barely see. Okay, and that is one more of my hints, is make a mark, write the word top on top of your tracing paper. So many people do this. I've done it a million times myself, where you have the paper upside down and you can't tell which side the paper is supposed to be up. So if you write top or something like that on the one and you can read it, then, or make a smiley face or something, then you'll know which side always to put up. And then by taping in this method, you'll be able to lift and peek right after you make your first line to make sure that you do have the paper upside right. And this is a tip worth sharing. Like, this is such boring stuff in a way, except for if it saves you time, I've got to share it with you, I just can't not tell you. All right, I found myself doing it. I find myself doing it all the time. And stopping myself, and maybe by talking about it, it's therapy. Here's the deal. We've got all these details on these cards, right? I sat here and started tracing, I'm tracing every card and all the lines going around them. I'm tracing the stuff on top. Now, bear with me, here's the deal. All of that has to be base coated white before we can go forward. And I have a black circle around that. And like, what am I thinking, right? So I'm going to want to put my Hold'em on. Well, and am I? Let's talk about that. We've got this circle. It goes right underneath that Hold'em. I think for the purposes of making this work that we're going to... Okay, sorry, I'm all excited. The work of going around each of these letters and worrying about all those corners and then going gold letters or whatever color they are on top, and then, blah, blah, blah with the card and everything. This is way too much work. So what we're going to do is, I think the work of going around this line of the cards is fine. So I'm going to put my black circle on, and I'm going to put my outline of just this line of my cards, because then I fill all of that in, and then I trace them and shade them into relief. That's going to be easier. Then I'll put my Hold'em on top, and then do that as a second tracing step. And this is going to go much faster for us, and we're not going to have to work so hard, which means we can finish quicker, which means we can move on to all those other projects we want to finish. All right, I have everything traced that I was going to trace. I'm holding off on the Hold'em, not putting in my top details. We talked about that. So now what is cool about this taping system, normally if you taped off the edge, you would have tape flaps. This way, my tape is pre-on there, it's pre-ready to go, and I'll get ready to put it back on. I can just lay it on there, and I will have the right places to tape, if that makes sense. It's not messy. All right, now because I have traced this in a weird way, I've got a couple of wonky lines. I just want to make sure that they don't translate. So I'm going to use my yellow monster to straighten those lines out. You know, this is the time when you get to fix things. Now I'm going to use the black, and I'm going to get that on there first. We'll unveil the palette we built last week, and ta-da! Nice, nice, nice. To do our black, we are going to use our flat brush. These, we call them workhorse flat brushes. These are fantastic for where they just go and go and go. I'm going to put a little bit of water on my palette and get out. Remember, we called black our darkest green last week. I want it creamy, not runny, just a little bit of water added to it. And I'm flattening my brush into it on the palette so that I have just the right consistency built right here. Now the other thing that we can do is get out our water bottles, and we can give ourselves a couple of little squirts so we can pick up some water. And I don't know if you can see this. Let me telephoto in. When you squirt on a palette with the little water bottle, these are our mini misters, it makes these little bubbly water bits that you can just suck into, and that way you can just pick up just a little bit of water that you need. And they're just a handy little place to keep water for you while you're painting. Now we want to make sure the paint is flat in our brush, and we're going to come over here. We're going to use, here's how I base coat. I'm not going to worry about this line. As a matter of fact, I'm going to kind of biff that line completely. I'm going to start away from my line just to deposit paint and make sure that I don't have way too much paint on my piece, on my brush. Then I'm going to come over with my chisel edge, just go right to and over that line, and then I'll just bring that in and smooth. I'm going to bring this in over my cards because I don't want a ridge. If I base coat right next to my cards, then I'm going to end up with a little bit of a ridge that will show later on as I'm shading and highlighting and floating and things like that. So we'll just come along, do our base coat. I'll do this once, then I'll repeat. The best base coating advice I can give anybody is to use thin layers and do them a couple of times, because it's easier to do thin layers a couple of times than thick layers and deal with all the problems that those cause. Okay, I really ought to get out my Lazy Susan, but for right now I don't want to stop showing you what I'm showing you. Okay, so I'm just going to fix that line with my brush just a little bit. Brush that in. We have sunshine today, and it is beautiful out. I hope that you are all having a great day. Okay, look at that. Make our lines. Now, one of the things we can talk about here, we've got this fantastic background that we've made, and what if, you know, I mess up my background? One of the things that you can do is you can go ahead and base or varnish before you get too far. Go ahead and give yourself a coat of glaze or one coat of varnish, and that way your background is protected and you can kind of dig on it without digging holes and things like that. That's one technique. You can shoot this with a blow dryer, then repeat your coats, and we'll come back and talk about what we're going to do next. Okay, I've got that done with 2 coats. I'm going to lay my pattern back on top, and it's upside down. That's really brilliant. One of the things we want to remember is that we have our palette that is our lovely wet palette, and we want to make sure that we protect it. So like if you're going to leave things alone for a little while, you want to make sure that you cover this. So it will only stay wet if you keep it covered and if you keep it misted with water. Like you have to mist it before you shut it. If you have dry paints going under the lid, they're going to have dry paints when you come out. But as long as we keep things covered, and I love that this has these locks on it. It's just fantastic. All right, so now that I've done that, I'm going to put my card pattern on. Okay, one of the things that we can do to test ourselves or to adjust things, I was reading my directions, and my directions said to use Spice Tan plus white for the cards. And that's my Spice Tan, and I mixed it with white, and I'm thinking, no, I don't think so. So always make sure that you know, if it doesn't sound right, and just because somebody wrote it doesn't mean that they're, you know, not human and hopelessly flawed. So I tried the Next Brown on my palette and put white in with it, and that's much more like a dirty card color. So change your directions, please, and it's going to be the Flesh Tan plus white to make that. And I've got just a little bit of black still in my brush. Because these cards are old Western dirty cards, Texas Hold'em things, so there's lots of dust flying around in that time, we're not going to worry about that being a brush mix color, so we'll just mix it as we need it using our brush and decide how light or dark we want our cards to be. Okay, get that pile mixed. The nice thing is when this gets all dry, that stuff just peels right off of there, so this palette is fantastic. Now, as I was getting ready, I had my pattern all on there, and I was uncertain. My tracing lines are hardly visible. They're visible to me, but not maybe to you. I was uncertain that I had things lined up straight. So I didn't want to put my card lines on until I knew I was lined up straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my card color. I'm going to go along and I'm going to base just the top lines so that I will be very certain that those lines extend. And one of my other tips for you is to take just a little bit of your Scotch tape. If you want those lines super duper straight, if you have building lines and things like that ever, just give yourself a little bit of a boost. Just where you need it. It's just going to make everything seem so much nicer. I don't know how much I'm going to do on the tops. I think that might be where the cards are going to be like more worn. So I think I'll skip that. Okay, then when I get over here and I'm ready to base, just base right on. Okay, come along the corner. We want to be careful about our black line now. We want to come to that line but not over it. Okay. Anyway, we'll get a couple of these top lines done. And once we have those done, we'll know exactly where our cards go. When you brush mix, sometimes you get a lot of paint built up in your brush, so just use that as your fill over here. Okay, chisel edge, come around the corner. Alright, now I've got the top of those cards traced on there. Now between my circles and my card lines and everything. Whoops. Okay, keep it straight. Okay, and you can see I've already outgrown my lines. We're not going to worry about that. Okay, come up here just a little bit more. There we go, that's a little bit better. Okay, put that on, trace our lines, and I had my tracing paper laying here somewhere. Now I can continue that line and figure out where the bottom of my cards go. Okay, don't worry about all those little lines. I think I'm right on the edge of that tape right there. If we've got it. By Jove, I think we do. Now, one of the things that you'll probably want to do is make sure that you don't have any ridge lines. So you'll just take a little piece of sandpaper, right where that overlaps, and just give it a little sand. One of the other good techniques when you're tracing a light color over a dark color, maybe make, if you know you're going to need two coats, go ahead and make the first mix darker so it'll cover better, and then make the next one the lighter one. The addition of the tape makes these lines so fantastic. You know, the first goal is to get it on there, give it a little sand, and then a little bit of water in there. Anytime you want precision, water is your friend. Get a little bit of water in the mix and it'll all be much nicer and cleaner. Dry paint has a tendency to drag. Come around the corner. Nice thing about having the black there is you can always clean up that bottom edge if you need to with the black paint. Okay, unless I can think of more to add, I think you're on your own for the next little bit here. My next step is going to be to sand this. I'll dry it, I'll sand it, I'll do my next coat. And then after I get that dry, I'm going to put my letters on. Okay, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more. Okay, I'm getting my letters traced on, and I did think of something I wanted to tell you. One of the things, we've got a dark, dark, dark background. If I put this whole piece of paper under here, and I make my little imprints with the heel of my hand, sometimes those are going to be hard to get off. So what you can do is you can take, this has got a piece of cardboard and stuff inside of it, you can lean your hand on something else that will interfere with it pressing, and it won't allow it to press in and make an imprint. This can save many projects. And then the other thing you want to do when you're tracing is you always want to make sure you wait until your project is thoroughly cured, otherwise you will not be able to get your graphite lines off. That is because they have sunk into the wet paint and they are now embedded. The paint dried them in there. So I wondered for years why I had such inferior tracing paper, and it wasn't the paper, it was me being in a hurry. So now I make sure I heat it and dry it real thoroughly. One of the things that I think I shared, but I just want to make sure, we don't want there to be a ridge right here where that line is going into the words, and we didn't want our ridge of our black into there. And so just by using the sanding disc, I just knocked that down just a little bit so that there's not a big noticeable ridge. Now we're ready to start our letters. Alright, I'm getting ready to do my rope, and I come to discover that I have damaged my brush and I have a wild hair. So I thought we would use this as an opportunity to find out how you treat a wild hair. If you just cut the wild hair off, then you end up with different problems. I can get the glasses on. So what you want to do is you want to go in here and get this out here. Pull that wild hair. Oh, you know what? Yay. Okay, mine just pulled out. But if it won't just pull out, what you do is you just cut it with a X-Acto knife right there at the ferrule line. This will get it much more cleaner than a pair of scissors, and you won't have a big thing sticking up in there. Okay, so that's how you deal with a wild hair. Okay, you can see my mouth there on the table. I've run out of this brown paper, and I don't carry it in this town, so I am going to toast as far as replacing this paper. All right, here we go. We're going to do the rope first. I'm going to wet our brush, and we're going to use this Round Pro, and what this is good for is this will make a perfectly flattened line, and it's a full brush, so I'll be able to get this all based in like one stroke. So the rope is Spiced Tan, so that's that same color that we had over here. I'm going to get just a little bit of water in my brush. Not too watery, creamy. You want it kind of creamy like face cream, not creamy like cream. Fill our brush, pinch off the water on our ferrule, and then we begin. So with our brush straight up and down, we're going to make a stroke that is as wide as the rope line. I'm going to go right into my letter just a little bit because I don't care about that. Consistency of width is going to be our biggest thing here, so if your lines are inconsistent like mine were, really, I just wanted those lines on there. I did not care if they were traced gently or nicely. Okay. Just get them all traced on, or based on. Give them 2 base coats, and we'll go into letters. Okay, now we're going to get our base coating done, and we'll be all prepped and ready to go. I'm going to use my Spiced Tan. I'm going to go in to it and pull a little bit out. I'm using the Pro Round brush, and I'm going ahead and flattening my brush. Notice what a flat line that will make at the end of my brush. That is why this brush rocks. See how fine and thin it is. Holds its shape and it doesn't spring back into a hole. I mean into a round shape. And what it will do also though is if you keep it round, it will keep its round shape. So you have a multi-functioning paintbrush here. So we'll get it nice and flattened out. This will create, it'll act like a flat brush. So we'll use this right next to our edges to create nice, crispy lettering lines. And just work to fill that in. Probably take 2 base coats. Okay. You repeat and do all the letters the same way. And then you get your base coat done. We'll take a wash of your medium dark brown. Add a little bit of water. Wash is always water. And you're going to do the line that's next to, I call it a drop shadow line. And you're going to wash on that brown color that's to the right sides of all the letters. Okay, a little bit underneath. I seem to be missing one of my lines here. Down a little further. We'll pretend. Okay, so we can just do all of those. Just fill them in nice and wash it. You only need to do 1 coat, but you'll do that after you're done with your lettering. And one of the points I wanted to, we've had a little bit of confusion on our Stay Wet palette. Not a confusion, just I think a clarification needs to be made. The Stay Wet, this Airtight Stay Wet palette, let's talk about oxidization of paint. When paint is drying, the way the paint dries is it gets air, comes in contact with the paint. So when your palette is open and not closed, then the air is getting at your paints and it is oxidizing. So that's why you get a scum on the top or a film. That is the drying process. When you put the lid on, it doesn't make the paint any wetter than when you had than the paint that you put the lid on top of. And there still is quite a bit of air inside of the container. So if you don't put the paint to bed at the, there's a lot of space there for the paint, for air. If you don't put the paint to bed at night or when you're done painting in the proper condition, then this isn't going to make it better. Like this isn't an improvement, it is simply a keeping device. So one of the things that I do is while I'm painting, I will give my paints a drink, okay, and as I go through the day, and then I cover my paints up when I leave my painting area, so just plop the cover right on it. And then before you go for the evening or get done painting, then you give everybody a nice, not too much, but a nice drink of water. And then, and if you live in a very, very dry climate, then a little cut piece of sponge with water in it sitting right here, and that's going to keep the moisture in the container. Then this puppy locks on. There is a gasket all the way around, so it is definitely an airtight situation. Okay, and it seals down, and now you're good to go. The next day your cum and your paints will be in the same general condition that you left them in. So make sure that you're treating your palette correctly, and it will treat you correctly. Okay, we're going to be about base coated. The next thing I'm going to do is roll the side of my box. However, I have this lovely finish on top, and I don't want to destroy the lovely finish. So we are going to take some tape. We'll use our 1/2 inch wide. You could use something wider. I don't see a wider one right where I need it. I have a drawer full of tape, and I can't find the tape size I want. Anyway, we are going to make this so that we don't get the color on that. So we'll just simply tape right along there, making sure to bray the edge with your thumb. And making sure that this is always completely dry. You do not want to mess with tape on a wet surface, especially something where you have a background that would be difficult to emulate. Okay, so right along. Now my plan is, because this box varies a little bit from the original box, that company went out of business, my plan is to put probably a red pinstripe on that edge. So you could probably technically not do this step, but I think it's a good tip, so I'm going to show it anyway, huh? Okay, get all taped. All right, now we could, you know, fold these things back so they're not poking over the edge and stuff. Nope. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our base coat color, stand this on end, and we're going to just roll that on, being very gentle next to that taped edge with, what's our color going to be? They are flesh tan. So that is your homework assignment for the week, and then we can come back to this and we can get everything done. Now our rollers are made so that if you put paint on the tip of it and try to do the insides of a box, then it will finish off that inside very nicely. It'll cut right on into the edge. But in this case, where I don't want paint to be on my tape edge, I'm going to use the roller, and I'm going to use that edge right there, unpainted, having no paint. Now you want to be careful when your box is drying to prop it open a little so that you don't seal it shut. I sealed my brush box shut last week when I was painting it. Okay. I imagine that you could put something in between it like wax paper or something as well. But I just usually put a paint bottle or something in there to prop it. And if you pull your tape as soon as your paint is dry, as soon as you know you have a good base coat, looks like it's covering in one coat for me, then you can, if you have any leaks underneath that edge, then you will be able to wipe it off right away. And fresh paint will come off with an eraser. If you moisten your wave eraser, your fresh paint will come off and it won't stick. Okay, I've got my sides done, and we'll do a reveal to make sure. Take our tape off. Okay, we've got just a little bit here and there, and I knew I was going to have a problem on the back side because that's where I used a brush instead of a roller. Brushes tend to squish in more paint than the others, so I have this lovely right where I had to use the brush. Here's that tip I talked to you about, where we're going to take the wave eraser. We open that puppy up. We're going to dip it into some water, and then right on the edge, it'll take just that edge of paint off. It's like dry, but not 5 minutes dry, you know what I mean? And then we wipe off the residue, brushing away. Okay, now if you do this and your background paint is still fresh, then you will take off your background paint too, so you want to use discretion when you do it. Okay, you didn't know an eraser could erase paint, huh? Okay, so I'm going to prop this, leave it, and you could, if you also wanted to, get your base coating done on the inside of your box. It's going to be all black. As we get ready to start our next part of our work on our Texas Hold'em box, I wanted to share with you, this is my airtight peel-off palette. We offer it on the website, but here is, I set this, I don't have a lot of room in my studio because I have so many things going on. So I had my box and I needed a flat place to put this that didn't have anything else on it, and of course all flat surfaces get covered in, I think, everybody's studio. Anyway, so I didn't have a home for it, and so I have a standing rolling cart that is sitting under a window, and that was the only flat spot I had. So I put the Texas Hold'em box on there, and then I put my palette on top of it, and it was right under a window. And last week, for the first time in 4 months, we have had sunshine, which was wonderful, except here was my baking Stay Wet palette. And what I would like to share with you is, and some of you that live in very, very, very warm or dry climates are going to struggle just a little bit with a Stay Wet palette or an airtight palette, because your paints are going to go to bed. Your paints will go to bed drier than they should. So you do want to make sure, let's telephoto down, you do want to make sure that you are putting them to sleep or to bed with full tummies of water. You know, give them a drink of water. So I definitely recommend, you know, giving them a mist. But I did want to share that we have, you know, we have nice creamy paint Okay, we don't have skins on things. Right here, where I've pulled out my paint, this is ready to peel off right there. But the puddle of paint is nice and good in the middle. If you know that you're going to be painting for long periods of time, then you would want to maybe build just a slightly larger puddle of paint. And then the other thing that you can do is you could put, let's see, you could put, you know, one of these little containers, something that would fit in here, a little dish of water just to keep the interior moist if you're having a problem. In my case, it's not a problem, but if you're in a drier climate, it could potentially become a problem. Anyway, but you could also put a moistened sponge in here if you thought that it was going to be a problem. If you weren't going to get to painting and you thought that you are way dry in Arizona or something like that, just open them each day and give them a mist of water, and that will prevent skins from forming and keep them nice and moist. The nice thing about the peel off palette is these peel off. Now this isn't heavy enough to actually like lift and peel, you know, so you just kind of scratch it off or use a warm soapy sponge and it comes right off. And so that's my hints and tips about your palette, but I'm very pleased. My palette stayed. I haven't looked at the project for over a week, and the sun baked these in their container for the whole week. No problem. Yay. I love it. I love it when a product works like it's supposed to, right? Okay, we're going to base our letters with Spice Tan. And put our glasses on so we can hit the line, right? So we're going to just flatten. Need a little bit of water there. To get a smooth, a creamy kind of coat, I guess, when you need some control, what you do is you thin your paint, not to watery, but to like real creamy. A creamy, loose creamy, I guess, a loose base. Then you flatten your paintbrush. I'm going to wipe some of that off. When you brush mix, you're going to be fully loaded. This brush will keep a perfect chisel. It's a fantastic brush. And there, look at how pretty that just flows on. Your paint is not usually the culprit. It is usually the consistency of your paint. And we'll just pull that. You can treat this brush, you can slide it just like a flat brush, slide it into there, and then slide it out because it will keep a flat chisel. Most round brushes, they're supposed to, but they're not all created equally. This brush is what I would consider one of the most perfect round brushes ever. And pretty much everybody in the industry agrees with that. Let's pull you in a little bit closer and I'll show you. There's a funny story. This brush is manufactured by Lowe Cornell, and Shirley Miller told me that the people that made this brush said, "You got to try this," and they laughed and just put the brush away and put the brush away, and the people kind of pursued it and said, "Oh, you've got to try this brush," and they put the brush away and they didn't look at it and didn't look at it. And then one day, for some reason, they got it out, and they were absolutely amazed by what this brush would do. And so then they, of course, manufactured it and everything. So it's a pretty neat story when the brush company doesn't believe it, and then they try it and become amazed. Okay, so we'll go in here. So we'll just get that nice and base coated, thin coats. If we need to do a second coat, that's fine. Okay. Okay, we're going to add drop shading. My normal recommendation for palettes, let's talk about palette setup. Okay, so you see I've got my paper towel here, I've got my water bucket here, and I've got my palette here. In my particular case, I am painting on screen, so I have to have this area right here for my, my project, and up here I've got my bucket of paints and things like that. So normally, I guess I could probably slide that over and slide this up and slide that in. If you keep your paint and your water bucket and your palette all on one side, then as you're not lifting across your project and dripping paint down on top of your project. So always try to, organize your workspace so that everything functions well for you, so that you're not struggling. I've seen so many paint sleeves dipped into paint as they've gone across and then just painted their projects and things like that. So We want to avoid that because then it makes for sad painting. We don't want sad painters. Okay, so we are going to add the drop shading. I'm going to go into our darkest brown, and we're going to use a little bit of water, flatten our brush, and then we are just going to add a very washy line to the, what side is that? The right side. Okay, nice, respect your chisel edges. Okay. And just do that to all of the right sides. Use a similar color balance so that you don't end up with, you know, highs and lows and stuff like that. But that really makes the letters seem like they're popping off of the palette there. We're going to shade our letters with the Spice Brown color. Okay, so we're going to just side load, blend, blend, blend. Get a nice good blend on it. The letters are pretty big, so do a nice blend. Take some time with it. And the shade at the top, we're just going to lay that down and walk it in just a little bit. Okay, that's called walking. Whenever, let's go a little bit tighter. Whenever you have something long and skinny, if I were, let me wipe that off and show you again. If I were just to take that and pull that down, it would be awfully insignificant. So we're just going to walk right next to it and draw that float out. Okay, that brings it out a little bit more. And I could even, let's bring it out a little bit more. Now when we're coming down here, I'm going to go ahead and cup into there. And then notice I'm patting this out and smoothing that. That is a trick, a floating trick. Now, it's a little bit rough texture just right in there. So what I can do is I can leave that alone, and I can go back to it as soon as my float is dried. And maybe we'll bring that just out a little bit more. So if I'm doing choppy movements, I always go back with one smooth, longer stroke to make it be smoother, to smooth out the rough little chops. Now I'm going to want to keep this out of my green. So if I get any kind of messiness going on, then I'll want to fix it right away. Okay, and we'll just continue along the left sides of all the letters. We're going to mix some of our straw with some of our flesh tone, whatever this light color is. Mix it with a little bit of water. I want to line this. I'm using my Mighty Fine liner, simply the best little cheapest lining brush. The best liner brush in the world is the Raphael, but not everybody wants to spend the money, so this is our second best option. Okay, so we're going to go over here, and we are simply going to get you on camera, and we're going to outline these letters. You can do a nice, lovely, thickish outline. Line to the outside edge. This is going to help clean up your letters. Keep your brush upright when you're lining for the best control. And don't outline outside of, you're going to line on the letter. Oops, and look at what I forgot to do. I forgot to shade right here. I'll have to go back and do that. Don't line on that shadow part, line on the letter part. Okay, get it all lined, and line the inside as well. You want to go for balance here. Like, you don't want the color to be like one of them real light and one of them real dark. So get a nice balanced look. There we go. See how that's just starting to pop with those letters. Now we're also going to add a line. Let's get you on there. But we've got the drop shading. We're going to go into our super dark brown. Or actually you can go into black. I think it says black on the directions. Get a nice wet mixture of your black. You can have it mixed with a little bit of the brown. Clean off my ferrule. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to line next to the gold line, the yellow line, with the black be on that drop shadow right there. This is a good way to clean up those lines. There we go. Repeat on all of the others. You know, when I record these videos and stuff like that, I get called away to answer questions and things like that. And I have to tell you, if I was a clever painter, I would remember to cover this when I'm getting up to leave. Thankfully, I wasn't gone like for an extended period of time, but boy, I'm not doing myself any favors. So far, this palette has been live, I think, 3 weeks. So it's not doing badly, but just now I left it for quite a period of time, and then came back going, "Err." So remember, cover your palette up. Okay, we're going to take some yellow, and we are going to put a wash of yellow. Let's see, a wash of yellow on the right side. So a wash is waterier than a float, so we're going to make sure that that's nice and washy. Blot on your paper towel to prevent it from being too crazy. And I'm going to do y'all a favor and flip it the other way because that's more comfortable to paint. This is what's going to give the letters the yellow cast that they have, so you want to make sure that you bring it into the piece just a little bit. You could almost wash over the entire letter. This is very transparent. Stay out of your outlining. Okay, and that's what gives them that little bit of yellow drama. See, if you don't blot, then the color walks around on your, which is what mine was just doing. Okay. All right, now we're going to do our rope. Yay. We're going to use our number 2 round, and we're going to use the yellow colors that were the same as the letter base coat. No, was that the... maybe it was the letter base coat. Anyway, the golden straw and the spice tan. Let's see. Something. You know what? It's straw plus white. I'm glad I read. Okay, so golden straw plus our white. Okay, a little bit of water because we want it to flow. I'm almost out of my white. Get a nice little flow thing going there. Blot my brush out because I don't want it overloaded. I'm going to flatten the brush in the paint. I think I might have gotten too wet. So someplace in a creamy kind of frosting way. We're going to flatten our brush on our palette so we get that chisel. And then we have to turn this as we go. And one of the best ways that I know of to turn something is to get out our Artist Buddy, which is okay. Get this on here, and it has a little locking mechanism. Let's go wide out so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so as you get tight, when you need to turn something constantly and stuff like that, it gets kind of tiring holding it. So this is an Artist Buddy, and it is your buddy because it helps you have another set of hands. So when you look up at this, it has these holders to adjust the height, and then it has a little locking mechanism that jams under there so that it will be steady and it will hold your project for you. The nice thing is it's got this rubber mat on it, so it will hold it at whatever angle is comfortable for you to paint at. Okay, and it adjusts to many different angles. Okay, now I've got to do it flat because I am talking to you fine folks. So what we want to do though is we want to adjust this so that we're getting the correct angle that we want. Okay, so that being said, let's get in close. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a series of S strokes. And now that I've talked to my paintbrush dry, okay, an S stroke starts at the top on the chisel and it ends at the bottom on the chisel. And you lock your hand and you make a little arched diagonal stroke. Now we want to leave space to put another stroke in between that's dark, and we want this tan color to show as well. So maybe about almost an inch apart. Okay, and we want them on an angle. So this is just wonderful to have this Lazy Susan here, because as I am correcting my angles, I can adjust. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, is we're going to simply do that all the way across. Watch at your angle. If you have a hard time keeping things straight, get out your yellow monster. Okay, and let's get you over on camera. And make your line first with your yellow monster. The nice thing about the yellow monster is it comes up with spit, it comes off with an eraser, and if you forget to erase it, it comes off with varnish. So you're never going to have lines that get stuck on your piece, okay? So you can always get these lines off. So that is a good way to adjust. And if you wanted to pre-measure it, and one of my favorite tricks for pre-measuring things is get out a compass. Compasses are not just for, they're not just for making circles, okay? You can just take your compass, make a line, and then you can make that line all the way around. We'll go this way, so I'll run that on that line, and that makes everything nice and even, okay? And it's pre-measured. So those of you that like things exact, that's a great way and an easy way, instead of getting out your ruler and going measure, measure, measure. Okay, now we're going to continue. We're going to go back and put in our dark chocolate, washy dark chocolate in between. And then we'll have like a 3 twisted, tiered rope. Okay. Okay, right about now is when I'm going to want to take some time, and I'm going to want to erase any lines that I didn't hit right with my basing. I want to get rid of any of these drop shadow lines. We're going to start, getting more and more top details on, and this is the time to remember to erase, because now that the base coats are done, okay, just go peeking about, looking for things that need to be cleaned up. Make sure you're dry before you start erasing. One of the things that crack me up is listening to people talk about how can you float tiny when you have a, they think that you need a really microscopic brush to float tiny. Now we're going to have to float on this rope, and that's going to be just a little bit tricky. I've got a number 6 brush here. I get it wet, and what matters in floating is the amount of paint you put on it. So if I put a microscopic amount of paint on my brush, I can use almost whatever size I want to. So I'm going to go with this, and I've got a number 12 here. So I can make the same size float using whichever size brush is more comfortable for me. Okay, now I'm going to go on my rope, and I'm just going to float right next to that edge. I think I'm using the wrong color. Okay, that's using a giant number 12 brush. So let's telephoto in. Am I using the wrong one? I think I need to be in the lighter brown, the medium brown color, instead of the dark. The dark is too dark. Okay, so get cleaned up. Make a tiny float with the brown. Okay. So, the key to this is not to overblend, and it is to turn your brush just a little bit on its side. And let me demonstrate this on a piece of paper, if I have one. Okay, so here I go. Whoops. Here I go. I can make it be fat, or I can turn on the chisel and I can make it be skinnier. As long as it's slightly off to the side, then I won't run my back of my paintbrush through the float and not mess up the whole line there. So you can, just by controlling how you're applying the paint by using the chisel this way, and I can also do this and I can walk it out. Okay, so I mean, you can make a float using just some various techniques. You can change what your float is doing. One of the things we want don't want to forget is where these ropes cross over each other. You'll want to shade on either side of the one that's crossing over. And that will make the other one look like it's sitting on top. Okay, and do that where they cross on both of them. And it doesn't matter if you switch sides. Like, I like the idea of the rope being shaded to the outside. So on both the original and on this one, I am just switching it so that it's on the top or on the outside so that it does exactly what I want it to do. And I dare somebody to go ahead and trace my rope and track whether or not I did that or not. And if you want to, then feel free. Alright, nowhere on my directions does it say to shade behind this rope, but this rope is definitely shaded behind. So we are going to shade it with black. Okay, and I need to, once again, move all my stuff. We had to shift around here just a little bit. So we are going to shade, get you on camera. Boy, the combination of trying to get a good angle and get you on camera, you need to make sure your float is real clean. That means that you don't have a dirty edge over there, like that. We call that a ghost. My float could definitely be fixed up just a little bit. So I'm going to wash and I'm going to do a better float. Really focusing on keeping a clean far edge. You can blot it on your paper towel and get rid of any ghost lines because they're just going to look really bad sticking out in the middle here. Okay, and so here I might want this a little bit finer. Don't want to go onto my rope at all. Maybe that doesn't show at all. I can cut right through my letters and then I can just clean up where I cut through. Okay, and you'll float on either side. Make sure you don't cut through wet floats. Oh, that's a stronger one. Once again, looking for a balance on our floating. Make sure that we don't have something real dark and then real light everywhere. All right, we're going to add our squiggles on our paint, on our rope. Sorry, thinking about my paint here. We're going to use the straw, the brown, and the tan color. And you're going to have to adjust this as you go. I'm getting out my Raphael brush because I think it makes the loveliest inky, hairy lines. Okay, and so if it shows really, like you can make just, that's not going to show very bad at all. If it shows, then you have to adjust your color. If it doesn't show, you want it to barely show. So what I'm doing, let's get you in real close. This is going to freak some of you out. Keep a wet cotton swab near you if you're freaking. So let's just scribbly, light pressure, not too much, everywhere on here. And you can add just a little bit lighter once you get into the lighter areas, like I just moved into the lighter. And a little bit more water. My paintbrush started flattening out on me. As I throw the brush across the room. Okay, I don't like those, so I'll just take them off with a little spit. Okay, and that is what we're going to do to make our brush all hairy looking. You could go through and you could use just a little bit of lighter, and in some places you can give yourself just a few extra bright. Okay, in the process of trying to diagram how many cards to put on the side of my my box, I have gone through many shenanigans, and so I'm going to go the old-fashioned route and show you how I would do it. Okay, so I have torn a piece of this. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to make my mark there, and I'm going to make a shorter mark over here for the short side. Okay. And what I'm going to do to get even marks, even lines, is my low-tech way of doing this. If I had a calculus brain at all, I'd probably be able to figure this out, but I don't. So first I'm going to try it the old-fashioned fold in half, fold in half, fold in half way and see if I like the size. And I don't think I like the size. So now what I'm going to do is do an approximate thirds. Okay, too big. Get it into my thirds. Okay, and that's going to give me approximately the same size. I can use my ruler. Go there, and so it is 1 and, this is right, one of those, let's see, I can't do this, this is so awful, 1, 2, 3, 3 of those, 1 and a 2 and, oh my god, 3 however many 3/8. Don't laugh at me. Okay, that was it 2 and 3/8, I think it was 1 and 3/8 because my ruler wasn't, nope, it was 2 and 3/8. Alright, so then we take our ruler, go over here to our 2 and 3 little hash mark lines, whatever that means. We can use our compass. And I think that's my line. Okay, we'll go over here and make our other line. Go over here. That would help if you can see that. So, we'll measure 2 and 3 of our little hash marks. And then I will use my compass and mark to there, to there, to there, and pretty darn close. I think we'll fudge this last one. And then we use our straight edge for a straight line. And we're going to divide that up. Now our cards on the side panel may not be the same size, but I think that'll work out just fine. Okay, and I think that these are just a little bit wide. Let's take a look. Now we want to look at our size and scope. I guess that can probably be just fine. We could make, okay, yeah, I think that'll be fine. So then we do the same exact effect with our side panel, and we have our low-tech measuring device, and we trace our pattern on there. We'll want to take our black paint and thin it to a nice creamy consistency. Just a little bit of water, just thin enough to flow, not thin enough to run. And this is the 4th week in my palette. This is the Stay Wet palette, and it's an airtight Stay Wet palette. It's my 4th week, and it is doing fantastically well. So, besides the fact that 1 week I left it open like half the time, so it got a little bit sticky in the middle, but misting it with water seemed to revive it pretty well. Anyway, we're going to flatten our Pro Round brush, and we are going to go in and base all of the details that are black. So all of these spades and the lettering. And then we'll go on with the rest of the card details. And in the meantime, on the sides on your cards, trace your emblem, and you simply just base them red, black, that kind of thing. And I was thinking that a nice design idea might be to go ahead and put like some of the Texas Hold'em words like the river or one of those kinds of words. So go into your word file and print that out and make it bigger, and then you could put that word on there instead of the cards if you wanted to. Okay, we're going to take out a little bit of either Delta's Rhythm and Blue or Blue Violet, which is what I'm converting this to, and we're going to make it real washy. And that's going to be our blue details. Oops, painting on everything. Okay, and then we look at our card details. Get a great close-up of our cards, and we just play color book. So we just pretend maybe a little bit blotted. Just give some of these details. Doesn't really matter where the color ends up, as long as you have just some details back there. Okay, do all your blues. So a wash, here's how you do a wash. This is like a lot of people really get this messed up. A wash of color is thinned paint, right? Oh, I forgot my line here. Just pretend on here. Okay, a wash of color is where you add water. So I put my paint there, and then I'm just going to make it washy. So it's 80% water, right? But if I go right onto my piece, then I'm going to have a big dark area. I'm going to have a floating around color. So what you do when you're going to wash is you thin your paint, and then you blot until the shine on your brush goes away. Whoops. Do that one more time. And you blot until the shine on your brush goes away, and then when you wash, it will be all nice and even colored. It's beautiful. We'll use some thinned Barn Red, maybe plus a little bit of the brown because that's kind of bright. Make it look a little more aged. Blot our brush and go on with the same details. Oops. Blotted too much. You want to look for balance. You want it to be balanced with whatever you're trying to do. Like if yours is dark, then make yours be a darker wash. If yours is, you know, bright or dull, make it be a duller wash. Whatever it needs. Don't try to make it just be just like mine, because mine might not fit for you. I'm going to take our yellow, our golden straw color, plus water. Do our gold. This is the place where I just start making things up. I just start putting colors here and there. Because it really doesn't matter at all. And I left off half our pattern here. We'll have to fake it. Try and line that up with our other color. Okay, and then we'll outline all this detail with some thin liner of black. Okay, now our next, we are to float the corners of the cards with a wash of dark chocolate. So the corners of the cards, let's see. Now this is to be soft. Okay, and this is with dark chocolate, which is our darker brown. And I have run out of palette space on my peel off palette. I should probably start peeling, right? Okay, and so these all get, I'm going to float to separate. And I like it in the brown better. Okay, so I left off, going to go into the lighter brown on my palette that is so full. This would be easy enough to clean off, but I'm too lazy to go to the sink and get my warm soapy towel because most of it's just from floating. And we want to just separate the cards, keeping our lines straight. And if your tracing line fudges a little bit, just move it over so that it makes a nice straight line. That's going to create our illusion of that separation, or our illusion of cardness, I guess I should say. Nice soft floats here. Okay, and so we'll go here and just get them all done. Okay, now we want to go maybe into a mix. You know, and I think it's real interesting. This is something to keep in mind as you're painting. Today, my dark brown might be too dark brown for me, but on another day, my dark brown might be just right for me. So I think it's safe to say that whatever works for you that day, just kind of go with that. We need to float we're going to do a C-stroke. So this is where we slide along the edge. We lock our hand, we don't turn it. And we come in here, and now we are going to turn it to come out of that corner. So we're going to lead in with that flat edge, come around that corner, and just get those edges. These are worn out cards. These have been played and played. Your shading can be a little irregular if you'd like to. And we're going to put little smudges everywhere, you know, like dirt and stuff. So while you have that dirty mess in your brush, if you need to go reload, and just feel free to just add some of your smudges. Get my bad trace lines off of there before I float. If you put paint on top of your trace line, it'll lock in, so you don't want to do that. Okay, we'll just give this a little bit. If I could read my own directions, I would have realized that we first did float with the lighter brown and then repeat with this darker. But when we do this, to separate the cards, we're going to turn our brush on its chisel edge so that we get just a real fine line. The thicker something is, the heavier that line would be when it got separated. So we want to make sure that we don't insinuate that these cards are real thick cards. They just kind of curled a little bit and stuff. Okay, and we're going to take the rough edges with our dark chocolate, which is going to be this. Dark brown again. Isn't it nice to have the colors all laid out in a row so that you can simply say, you know, by having my dark green all the way around, then it's real easy to say, okay, I'm in the dark chocolate or the dark brown, the medium brown, or the light brown. Makes it a little bit easier to find your way in a palette that's mixed. On our turned edges, we're just going to go over here and we're going to give them their little ripped corners. Clean up with the clean side of our brush. Turn our piece. We're going to line everything with our, and we want to shade behind those with black. So to shade them, so around here, then what we'll do is we'll come around the outside of our cards, black, and that will just carry them up off of the surface. I'm going to finish up with thin lines of details around our cards. Oops, splash water drops on our playing cards. We are going to, I think that is it on those. Around our playing cards down here, we are going to do the Spice Tan, which is our light brown, or our medium brown, sorry. And we're going to round these edges. So first we're going to go around and just round the edges. And then go straight down our card line. And so when we get around the bottom, we'll make that be a little bit wider down there. Do the same over here. And this is called repeat, repeat, repeat. And we'll do back to back floats here. So that means that when we do the other side, we'll be floating over here. Now, do I care? Oops, I care that I just did that. Do I care if this is messy? I don't. Because if it's messy, it will look older. But I do want to clean it up just a little bit. Okay. And we are going to, and then we'll separate the cards with a line of black. So come in. With the thin line, so once we get them both floated, then we'll come in with our black, which is not thin enough. I'll get it separated. We'll base our emblem in, and that will just be with the black or the barn red color. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Let me just show you. If I was going to make a band around this, there's a red band on the original box because it had a band in the elements of the design of the box. But what we're going to do is we would take a compass, and we would just run the compass like along here if I wanted to say have a red band going on the top and the bottom of this. And then we would take our masking tape, okay, and we would simply line that up and tape that. Okay, and that's how we get a nice straight edge, and we tape both of them, and we would just pat on the color and then varnish, and you are all done with your Texas Hold'em Father's Day box. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next week we have a nice, lovely surprise for you, a new project. But I will wait and let you go peek at it online. Thanks so much.